culture and in making sure that, you know, citizens can participate in that culture, it's really key that we do think about audiences. And I think, you know, we have to like figure out ways of getting those audiences to respond to the work that we're making. And if those audiences are old and white, that's a problem. I guess I say interactive documentary since, you know, it's particularly sort of non-fiction that we're focusing on with this fund. Yeah. And sometimes I call it cross-media and sometimes I call it cross-platform. But it's not even necessarily cross-platform because sometimes it's just on one platform. I guess the reason I think transmedia can be confusing is I think the default definition is sort of the Henry Jenkins definition, which is people immediately think of this sort of like franchise, sort of Star Wars, Star Trek-y, Matrix-y universe where you have, you know, the book and the cartoon and the comic and the TV show and the game and all the rest of it, which I think can make filmmakers a little panicky, like they feel a bit panicked. There's so many amazing things you can do right now. Thinking about, you know, the web as a canvas, thinking about, you know, what you can do with apps on phones, on iPhones or tablets. And so the way I think about it is, you know, there are just, depending on what you want to do, and of course it all comes back to what you want to do, there are new ways of telling stories, and I think for some people they're not thinking about it because they get so panicked by this transmedia landscape that they kind of just bury their heads in the sand. Right. But, you know, it could just be like, for example, Welcome to Pine Point, which I think is such a lovely, I don't even know what to, sometimes the words aren't even there because it's kind of a website, but that just demeans it in a way. It's so lovely, like this sort of nostalgic storybook on the web, I guess. So things like that, you know, they can be quite simple. I personally think that with this new work, the same rules are going to apply in many ways in terms of craft and quality, and you know, and we were talking about this earlier. I think that some of that is actually new, faster, and different ways of working, like, you know, doing things in a day and not holding on to everything like filmmakers do. You know, not like honing that trailer for months and months and months, like hacking something together, getting it out, getting feedback, and then creating something more iterative. But I still think that, you know, there are going to be good projects and there are going to be bad projects, and there are going to be some projects that are much more interesting and nuanced and clever and you know, really like kind of like getting at deep issues in interesting ways and coming, you know, from different angles. And then there are going to be some that are much more kind of, you know, Jersey Shore-like. And I mean, you know, I guess that's just, you know, that's fine. That's the way it should be. But I definitely want to make sure that, you know, it does bother me that I think sometimes people think about some of this cross-platform stuff as not being nuanced and not having the ability to have the craft and the context and the storytelling skills that, you know, for example, a feature-length doc have. But, you know, that's because we're at the beginning and we're trying to figure out some of the, you know, some of the terrain. And I think that it's a bit of a sort of snotty, unhelpful way of approaching it. Like, I think we need to figure out, like, well, how do we bring craft to it? Like, what is the craft? You know, perhaps the craft is you have a coder and the coder is an artist and part of your team, and you think differently about design, and the design is part of the team, and that's the craft. Yeah. But I definitely think that's really key to me with the fund. It's all about craft and, you know, making like really beautiful things and finding important stories. It's not about hacking stuff up and throwing it up on the internet. Right. Although that could be part of it.